Welcome to On My Way to Wealth, the podcast where busy Gen Xers can learn financial tips as they navigate life on their way to wealth. And now, please join your host, Luis Rosa.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of On My Way to Wealth. My name is Luis, and I'm your host. Happy 2023. Today, I want to talk to you about the importance of estate planning, what it is, and some of the best practices that everyone should be paying attention to. And I have an expert in the field, a good friend of mine, Andres Mazabel. He is the head of advisor solutions at Trust and Will, which we're going to talk about. Having spent 10 plus years in private banking, he's now on a mission to help advisors implement estate planning and deliver comprehensive planning. Andres views estate planning as a huge opportunity for individuals and financial advisors to deepen relationships, add value and implement legacy planning conversations. So his work is mostly with financial advisors, but we're going to talk today about some of the basics of estate planning as an individual. So without further ado, welcome, Andres.
Awesome. Luis, thanks so much for having me, man. Really looking forward to the conversation. I've been with Trust and Will for 3 years, but prior to that, I as you noted, spent over 10 years working with clients and families. So one, I appreciate you having me on because estate planning is a big conversation that many people think about, but never really take action. So very excited to be here, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. And, I read your corporate bio, but if you don't mind, would you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself? I know you live in San Diego. Have you been there your whole life? How did you get there? Of
course, man. I was actually born and raised in Colombia in South America. We immigrated to California about 22 years ago. And ever since, San Diego's been home. And I'm super fortunate to live here. Went to high school, college here. As I was in college, I was a teller at Washington Mutual before they went under.
I remember that. Yeah, before.
and that's honestly, man, exactly. Good old WAMU days, and home of the free checking. Maybe that's why they went under.
Yeah.
And from there, man, I started to get such a big, really get educated on banking, loans, savings, investments. Because when I was in high school, college, it really wasn't a big financial, a big topic that you really learn a lot about, right? So one, I'm super fortunate that through that exposure, I was able to learn a lot about working with an advisor, the impact of planning, all that. And yeah, man, been at Trust and Will for coming up on 3 years, in which, we're very passionate about helping solve a pretty big problem, man. More than 60% of families don't have an estate plan.
Yeah, I find that, it's atrocious. And a lot of it, some of it could be cultural too, because I know a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about money, especially about death, right? Because obviously if you're doing estate planning, that may come up at some point. I want to let people know that this is a general problem. You see famous rich people that also fail to plan for their estates, and they leave quite a mess for their heirs too.
Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, I think historically, estate planning is something that people think about as, I don't need it. I'm not wealthy. I don't have millions of dollars, right? But I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that many families and individuals have. Estate planning should be for everyone. And I'm talking, if you have kids and they turn 18 and they're going off to college, you should have an estate plan set up because, and we'll talk more about details, but the importance of, as a parent, you having a power of attorney for your kid or vice versa, right? And having access to certain information that you've always been used to because they've been your kid and they're under the age of 18. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think that's one of the big things that we're really helping lead with is the misconception that you don't need an estate planning because you don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars or a couple $1 million.
Yeah, that is such a great point, man. And, I was in that boat as well, because like you mentioned, when I was going to school, money was there was no money class in school. There was health, government, all that stuff, right? There was no money class. We didn't talk about finances to that level in my house. It was mostly, at best, maybe work hard and save money, right? But it wasn't anything about investing or estate planning or any of that stuff. And I too thought every time I heard estate planning that this was just something for the rich, something that didn't apply to me. you had to have a lot of money and properties and all kinds of millions to even engage in that conversation, right? So I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to get into some of the mistakes that people make, including not doing any estate planning at all. So let's get into some of the basics here. If you can tell us just in general, what is a will, what is a trust on the basic terms?
Absolutely. So from I would say even higher level of that, estate planning is simply you and or a spouse or just yourself making decisions about if you have assets, where do they go and how? If you have kids, who takes over your kid, or not takes over, but who helps be guardian for your children if they're under the age of 18. Pets is also a big part, believe it or not, as to why many young families create an estate plan to create a pet guardian. And then 4, this is something that many people are really starting to understand the importance of it, especially through the pandemic. Estate planning isn't just about death. There's also incapacity, unfortunately, right? So if you're car accident, something happens, et cetera, you're in a hospital, there's very important documents like a power of attorney, your medical directives that we can talk more about in making sure that those are in place.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another great point, because it's not all about the money. Yeah, there's
Exactly.
so many other things that you want to take care of. And I think the pandemic, like you said, definitely brought that more to the forefront, because some people found themselves in situations where they needed access to something related to the loved ones and they weren't able to do it just because they didn't have any type of documents in place.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for that definition.
Of course. And many people always ask us, well, when should I start thinking about estate planning? Again, most common, one of the biggest triggering points is when you become a parent. I think that's typically when you're like, man, I'm responsible for like this little baby now for the rest of my life, right? And one thing that many people don't think about or know, obviously, God forbid, doesn't happen, but if something happens to you as a parent, your kid isn't the age of 18 yet, and there isn't a spouse to help raise that child, you actually, someone in court in your state would be deciding who would be the legal guardian for that child. So just think about that, right? It's think about a judge who doesn't know your family dynamic, doesn't know your family, kind of making that decision on your behalf. So that's typically one of the main trigger points as to why many people start thinking about creating an estate plan.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I tell people sometimes, like, if you don't have an estate plan, your state will have one for you.
100%, man. And then from there, it's like, okay, great. Well, I have a good understanding of why it's so important to me. And then there's the complexities of like, well, what documents and what do I need? So from a very basic, again, and full disclosure, I'm not an attorney, I'm not providing legal advice, but hopefully providing a little bit more education. A basic will is a legal document that you can write, execute. You can do it yourself. You can do it through an attorney. You can do it with online solutions like Trust and Will. But in short, it's you putting on paper, what assets do you have? How do you want those assets to be passed on? To who? How? And then also it's where you talk a little bit more about, your wishes for if you're sick, if you can't make a decision, you can't go to the bank, you can't pay a bill. All those are decisions that you're making alongside, if you have kids under the age of 18. So it's a very basic, honestly, here's what I own, who do I want to receive those assets and help make decisions on my behalf.
Right. And, I'm glad you mentioned assets, because sometimes people might think of a different kind of asset, like traditionally, right? They might think of, my home or maybe my investments and so on. But they don't realize that they also have like their personal belongings and keepsakes and family heirlooms too, that you can include in there, so something that you can't really like have a title to, right? Like, cars and homes have titles, right? But certain things like a ring you might want to pass down doesn't have a title, right? And you can designate those personal items as well.
Absolutely. You can go through and say, a specific gift, maybe it's a collectible, it's a piece of art, it's something that your grandparents passed on to you that's really special to you. So it's outlining that. Also, when we pass, what type of ceremony do you want? Right? It's taking a lot of the guessing work out for your family and you saying, this is what I want. Right. And I think, and I do want to point this out. I think historically, especially our culture, we view death as something that we want to avoid in terms of like having the conversation about, well, we're all going to die. Right. And like really sitting down either as a family or whatever that looks like for your family dynamic and just having a conversation about it and being a little bit more comfortable, being able to talk about what are some of those decisions that need to be made and the importance of it as well.
Yeah, there's definitely some cultural aspects there, and even superstitious stuff. I know people that feel like if they talk about that, it's going to happen to them, so they don't even want to buy a life insurance policy because they're like, oh, if I buy a life insurance policy, I'm going to die now.
100%. And as we always hear, there's only two guarantees in life, right?
Yeah,
taxes.
Yeah, so I tell them, look, you have car insurance, right? It doesn't mean you're going to get into an accident, but you want to have it just in case, right? Obviously, it's mandated to some degree, right? Depending on your state, but that's kind of the example I used to say. It doesn't mean that the negative thing will happen just because you're insuring against it, right?
Absolutely.
So what would happen if somebody just doesn't do any of this planning? They never had a will, never had a trust, anything. They just pass away.
Yeah, good question. So if anyone's heard the word or the term probate, so probate is essentially in every state is a little different, but probate is the process of settling your estate. So as an example, I have a home, assets, investments, life insurance, etc. But I have maybe no beneficiaries on any of that, or I have no will or no trust. Everything goes through probate. Probate is literally the legal process of a judge sitting down and saying, let's look at my estate. What assets? How are the bank accounts, investment accounts titled? Is there any estate planning documents in place? If no, the judge is now then going to go through and say, well, who, is Andres married? Does Andres have kids, etc.? And starting to look further into what type of family I have to see how those assets should be distributed. So think about that. It's a judge that's starting to look at your family dynamic versus you making that decision. Probate is also, in many states like California, where you and I live, very expensive. So there's a cost to go through probate. And I will tell you this from personal experience of working over 10 years in banking, it takes time. So I used to have to set up, I used to have clients, unfortunately, Luis, that would come in, maybe a spouse died of, parents, whatever the case might be. And, at the bank, okay, well, obviously we would, acknowledge the situation, but start collecting the death certificate. And and then from there, they would actually have to provide us with, if there's no beneficiaries or no estate plan in place, they would have to provide us with the letters from probate, and we would have to move those assets and move it into an estate account. And let me tell you, when someone passes, you have bills, mortgages, etc., that you have to pay. You can't access those funds until probate is settled. And don't quote me on this, but I think in California, it's taking over 12 months to actually settle an estate. So just think about that. I think for if there's one thing, hopefully a couple, but one thing that your listeners would walk away from today is that estate planning isn't a decision you make for yourself. It is one of the most selfless decisions you can make for others to make their lives easier. But let's be honest, once you're dead, you're dead. You don't feel anything. It's what your loved ones are going to go through. And the easier you can make it for them, the better.
Yeah, that is an amazing point because, I've actually witnessed that as well. I've helped clients where like an aunt passed away or somebody that didn't have an estate plan and they became the executor of the estate. And they, like you said, they had to go to court, get letters of administration. And then they had to deal with so much paperwork, so much time that had to pass. And there are certain bills that couldn't be paid. And what do we do about the mortgage now? We're going to sell the house. It was like all these things because there was just nothing in writing. And they're already dealing with the emotional pain of having lost the person. And then on top of that, to add all this legal stuff, and it becomes a public matter, right? Because it's just a judge doing this, right? And it's more expensive, like you said. So it's like you're really not doing your family any favors by not having a plan in place.
Of course.
Without a doubt.
Of course.
So I'm glad you bring that up.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Sorry.
And then I was going to say, I know we talked briefly about the will, and then I want to talk briefly about a trust, because I think many people are like, what's the difference, etc. So a trust, think about it as a more advanced type of estate planning. In everyday terms, you have more control over how your assets are distributed. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we have a $250,000 life insurance policy. We have a $500,000 brokerage account, and we'll use that as an example to keep it simple. And I have younger kids. With a trust, I actually have the ability to say, I don't want my kids receiving all that money when they're 18, 19 years old. I want to make sure that I'm setting them up for success as they mature, and as there's, they might have different needs in different stages of life. So in a trust, you have more control over how those distributions are being made. So if I say, I want my kids to receive distributions at ages 18 because they're our legal age, but maybe not again until 25 or 35. So you have more control and customization of how those assets are actually passed over. And then two, a trust typically completely avoids probate. So remember, again, that example I showed on going through courts and all that. If you have a legally, executed trust, it actually helps you completely avoid probate. And it's also private. These aren't public records like it is when you go through probate and all that. So a lot of people appreciate that. You're probably thinking, okay, will, trust, one, don't overcomplicate it. It's actually usually depends on when you start working with an attorney or you engage with us or whatever the case might be. There's kind of different parameters depending on the level of assets that you have on if you should start with your basic will or if you should start with a trust, kind of depending on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So doing all that proper planning ahead of time can really save money and time to your heirs. So a way of looking at it then would be, if you don't plan, then you're going to leave less for your heirs because they're going to have to spend some money in the probate process, which is going to be more expensive than you would have spent probably setting up the trust in the first place, right?
Great point. That's a great point. And outside of, in many times, man, families are like, I will pay whatever attorney as much money as I need to get this settled as quickly as possible. So a lot of times it's not the cost, even though it's a big factor, but it's just the inconvenience and the time that it takes to actually go through that process as well.
Gotcha.
And man, I hate to point this out, but I have to, because I did it for over 10 years. It broke my heart, man. But how many families I would see being broken up because of, the dynamics, because there wasn't an actual plan in place. And the son did this and the daughter did this and they shouldn't have, and they took more money, etc. And literally, I can't tell you how many stories I heard that I haven't talked to my sibling for 5 years because after my mom died, etc. So it's unfortunate, obviously. So think about that as well as don't put your kids or beneficiaries or people that you love in a situation where money could get the best from them. So
yeah. That is true, and very unfortunate. I've witnessed those types of situations as well. Somebody passed, and then unfortunately, the siblings all had different feelings about who should get what, and just became toxic to the point where, you had people just not talking to each other after that, which is crazy, right? And that's also another thing that could be avoided because you could lay it all out, and it is what it is, right?
Absolutely.
So another great point, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's say for some people that have already taken that step and say, hey, I do have a will, or I set up a trust a while back. And so what are some of the major mistakes that sometimes people oversee, like after they've already set things up?
I'll get to that. I want to, if you don't mind, go the other route because it's such a much bigger portion, the percentage of families that don't have one. So if you're thinking, okay, great. Well, I know I've been potentially heard about estate planning, etc. What do you actually need to do, or what decisions do you need to make? I think is a great point, and I'll segue to that if you don't mind, Luis.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, thank you.
So one, estate planning, and so typically, let's talk about what does the process usually look like. You set up a meeting with an attorney, and I'm going to reference California to do a basic will. Probably maybe about $1,000 to $1,500. A trust, it could really depend on the complexities, but let's call it $2,000 to $5,000 or more. Okay, so one, if we're wondering, well, why did Andres mention that more than 60% of people don't have an estate plan? Historically, it's been very expensive. And two, the access of like going to an attorney's office and all that just seems like intimidating in some ways. So attorneys won't go away. They are a great option. So where Trust and Will comes in is we're an online platform that helps you do that. So simplest way is think TurboTax, but for estate planning. So either with us or an attorney or another online platform, it's one, deciding, do you need a will or a trust, which that company is going to help you make that decision. And two, it's really sitting down and saying, what decisions do I need to make? So for guardians, if you have kids or pets, for assets that you have, how do you want those distributed? Who do you want your beneficiaries to be? How do I want those assets to be distributed? Is it even? Is it more to one side of the family? Whatever the case might be, just because we all have very unique family situations, if you will. And then making decisions around, if you're in the hospital, right? So who would be your power of attorney? Who do you trust? Who can make decisions on your behalf? When it comes to end of life planning, what type of care do you want to receive? What type of ceremony do you want to have? Right. So not to discount, they're heavy decisions, but they're important ones. And most people think, gosh, the process could take me, months or cost me thousands of dollars. In some cases with an attorney, yes, but it's usually a simple process of making decisions. You don't need to sit through and have all your bank account numbers or titles to your deeds, all that. It's actually much simpler than people think of what it means to actually start and complete their estate plan. And I'll pause there for thoughts if you have any, but I think hopefully painting a picture on it's not as complicated as you think. And then, with many financial advisors like you, there's a lot of resources that we have available via checklist that help you say, this decision, check. What does this decision mean? Okay, let's talk about it with my spouse. Let's get it done, check. And then you kind of go through the process and it helps you make it. And then also keep in mind, with us or an attorney, you can make updates to the estate plan. It doesn't mean I created it and I'm stuck with the decisions that I made. You can always, amend or make updates to your estate plan.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was thinking about too the fact that there's some estate planning that can be done outside of the will and the trust as well. Some people, let's say, depending on the stage that they're at in their life, maybe they don't have kids yet or something, and they just have a simpler estate plan for now. They can probably get by making sure they have a will and then making sure that they have the proper beneficiaries designated on like their 401k accounts or life insurance that they get through work and things like that. And then, like you were mentioning, once you have a little bit more complexity in your life, whether it's, you started a family or maybe you have, properties that you invest in and things like that, then it might make more sense, right? To then kind of upgrade your plan to an estate. But I like the fact that you mentioned that you're not really stuck with those decisions because you get to update that. It's still all of your property, right? So you still have a say into who gets what, and you can change those at any time, right? And especially as your family grows and things like that, you can go ahead and make those changes, which I guess is kind of a little bit of a segue into one of the questions I had as to what are some of the major mistakes you see some people do once they take the step to go ahead and create their estate plan?
Good question. Good question, man. I will tell you this, and this was, again, from my experience in over 10 years in doing it, is how many people don't update their estate plan. And think about it. If you have a second child, maybe you have a beneficiary or an executor in your estate plan that you're like, things have changed, I don't want, et cetera, whatever the case might be, is not making those updates to the plan. Really, really important to do. Also, I'll tell you that, in some cases, there's as your complexities change, if you maybe started with your basic will, but you bought a home, you started a business, you received an inheritance, whatever the case might be, your assets level have changed. A risk could be is that if you created your will, but now you have, I don't know, let's call it $500,000 in assets. Well, again, remember, a will would still go through probate. So that's where you should always think, okay, as my life situation changes, am I in the right type of estate plan that I should be in? And again, I will say this doesn't change like every year, every even couple of years. This is rare, if you will, for you to be like, go from a will to a trust, etc. But it's really important for us to be very proactive about that in working with your attorney, working with someone like us to really make sure that you're in the right plan that's going to protect the assets and, protect the assets and family that you have, to make sure that it's going to align with kind of whatever vision of your legacy that you have, that it aligns with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how does the process work? First of all, like, how do they go to your company's website, Trust and Will? And then if they wanted to move forward, more or less, like, what does that look like as a consumer?
Yeah, good question. Good question. So we started, if you're wondering, Trust and Will, we started 5 years ago. We looked at the landscape and we're like, man, there has to be a reason why more than 60% of people don't have an estate plan. So we created, again, the TurboTax of estate planning. We offered state-specific documents in all 50 states. A basic will for a couple, it's $259. That includes your power of attorney, your HIP authorization, everything. And then a revocable living trust is $699 for a couple. And essentially, the system and platform is going to guide you through the process as TurboTax does. But then also keep in mind, we have live member support. We understand that, yes, we can create a super simple platform and education, all that, but we understand that individuals and families will have questions. So 6 days a week, you can talk to us, schedule a call, email us. In a state like California, as an example, at least we actually have attorney support where a client can actually pay an additional $200, and I can actually talk to an attorney to be able to get legal advice in that state. So I go through the process, answer questions. I'm stuck, I need help. I talk to someone. I just put it away, but I had my actual Trust and Will estate plan I wanted to show you. And then documents come in the mail. I can, from there, essentially view the documents, get them signed, get them notarized. And then really, really important is making sure that people in my estate plan know about the plan. So Luis, if I add you as an executor, you need to know. You need to know that, this is the actual decisions that I made. This is what I need your help with. So sharing that plan with you. And then also with your financial advisor. This is definitely something that many clients, and I will say this is being more led by the advisor, which I think is a huge value add, but making sure that the advisor is, one, educating their clients on the importance of it, and two, if they want to, the client can actually share the documents back with the advisor. And again, as I make updates or changes, as my life gets maybe a little bit more complicated, complex, whatever the case might be, I can log in, I can make updates and changes to that estate plan.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, that's one of the things that I go over with my clients too, because a lot of the times I work with a lot of young couples that are just getting started with their families and all. Yeah. And it's very often they don't have an estate plan in place at all. So it's one of the things that, like you mentioned, is typically led of, so if you're working with a financial planner, that'll be part of what you do as part of the process is figuring out how much life insurance you need, if you need any. Do you have the right beneficiaries in your 401ks, your IRAs, your other accounts? And then do you have a will in place, powers of attorney, healthcare directives? And, just as you mentioned, it may seem overwhelming, but it really isn't that complicated. And you guys have done a great job at just making it simpler. And the fact that you're not just all on your own typing in information. If you have questions, you could contact someone to at least guide you through the end of the process. And all the documents are legal to each individual state, so
Yes.
it makes it a lot simpler.
Yes. Yeah. So I think really at the end of the day, it's providing a platform for people that don't have extremely complicated estate planning needs, a way that's easier, more accessible, definitely more affordable. And then I think too, it's, just more accessible in terms of being able to do it from the convenience of your home with your spouse or by yourself, and going through that and taking your time and coming back if you need to, I think is really helping a lot. We've done, I think, close to about 450,000 plans nationwide.
That's amazing. Yeah. And, taking your time is important when you're talking about these decisions. For sure. You don't want to have to figure all that stuff out in an appointment with an attorney.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. So how do they find your website?
Yeah, it's trustandwill.com. Very simple.
Very straightforward.
The and is spelled out. So definitely come check it out. You can always, take a look at the website, the pricing. We also have, we drive almost 100,000 families to our website just from our Learn Center. So if you're interested in learning more, we have hundreds of really, really good articles on the importance of it, on beneficiaries, on trust funding, etc., whatever the case might be. So if you're just interested in learning more about the topics and the impacts of it, check us out. Would be grateful. And yeah.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love the educational piece to it too. And also for those of you listening, Andres has been kind enough to offer a 10% discount to all of my listeners. So I will be putting a link in the show notes if you decide to move forward. Obviously you can go to the website, check out the Learning Center. If you decide you want to move forward, creating a trust, a will, and so on, you can use that link and get yourself a 10% discount. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, move on to a little lighter topic, some fun stuff. So I read somewhere that you're a good salsa dancer. Is that right?
I love to salsa dance, man. It's funny because so as I told you, born and raised in Colombia, man. But when I was maybe 9-10 years old, I still remember.
Yeah.
I still remember like this was yesterday, man. My parents were like, "What do you like? Your birthday's coming up. What do you want to do?" I don't know. Many other kids maybe like a theme park or something. I was like, I want to have a dance party. And my parents hired me like a little DJ with lights. And it was just like dancing all the time, man. And it's a big part of my culture, a big part of like who I am. I try and do it once a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. But it's a huge passion of mine.
And what are you doing once a month? You're going like to an actual club to dance, or you're going to a studio?
Yeah. So I've done both. I've done like the actual like studio. I like more just like the freestyle. So going to like in San Diego, there's a place called Café Sevilla, and it's awesome. They do live music. Usually, nice. I think Fridays and Saturdays. So I try and get there like once or maybe twice a month because it's so much fun, man. I really enjoy it.
I love that, man. Yeah, I'm actually taking private lessons with my wife right now once a week.
No way. How fun.
It's really cool.
Did you grow up dancing?
I did. I'm from Dominican Republic, so salsa, merengue, bachata, right? That's all. But I really enjoy like when I see a couple that really knows how to dance and they're like really in sync. It's really cool, man. It's like another language, man. So I was drawn to that. So I wanted to have that as well. So we'll be taking lessons we got introduced to it as a couple because we started when we got married. We did a choreographed dance, which involved. Fun. Yeah, there was a section of it that was salsa.
Send me a video.
Yeah, I will actually. I have the link. It was we kind of fooled everybody because we did the traditional slow dance, that first, but it was actually a mix. Then it went into a little faster, there was some bachata in there, then it ended up with some Marc Anthony salsa. So it was like everybody was like just blown away, like what? But it took us quite a bit, right? We were like practicing, and then we're like, hey, let's just keep it going. And
I love that. How often are you guys doing it right now?
We're doing it once a week right now.
No way.
Yeah, Sweet. In LA. Yeah, every Saturday. So we're loving it, man.
You're going to be an expert, man.
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, it seems like every week I learn like a different turn or something. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like, and we wear our step counters, and then when we're done for that hour, like, wow, we were on fire, man. It's like before the midday, I'm already like almost at my goal for the 10,000 steps a day, And
it's also a great community. Like, you can find and build really good friendships from it as well.
Yeah, I look forward to doing that. Once I'm like, a couple more lessons in, that we're like, all right, let's start hitting like the social aspect of it.
Totally.
I'll definitely be doing that, man. Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming through, man. I appreciate. Glad that we bumped into each other at Schwab Impact. I know that some of my audience members are also financial advisors. So if you want to look at Trust and Will to partner up with them and see how you can help your clients, be sure to check them out as well. trustandwill.com/advisors. And I'll put the link in the show notes as well. So gracias, Andres. I look forward to seeing you, man. I'm going to San Diego sometime. I think in May, there's a conference for NAPFA. So
let me know, man. Let me know.
Yeah, I don't know if you plan on attending it, but either way, man, love to catch up. Maybe we'll go to that cafe or something, man.
We should, dude. 100%. Please let me know. Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for helping spread awareness about such a big, important topic of estate planning.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming through and dropping all the knowledge on us. And, I love the educational piece that you guys are doing. So much appreciated.
All right, man. Thank you again.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always, if you have any questions, send me an email, luis@onmywaytowealth.com, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to On My Way to Wealth. If you have any questions, please send me an email at luis@onmywaytowealth.com. The information provided here is for information and education purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of myself, unless otherwise specifically cited. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations are made by my firm or myself about other parties' information or accuracy or completeness. All information or ideas provided should be discussed in detail with a financial advisor, accountant, or legal counsel prior to implementation.